Hi, I'm Jules Whale, and I run a life coaching practice in Salisbury. And as part of a podcast series that I've been making, I really thought it was a nice idea to touch upon a very, very important subject, and that is values. And what I'd like to do in this particular episode is to talk a little bit around the relevance of values, knowing that we have them, how we find out what they are, and what we can do about it. So, values are very, very deeply entrenched in our being, and they sometimes we don't even know, as I said, that we have them. So, if I said to you, okay, you have a value, I would then say what is important to you. And if I put it like that, I say, what is important to you about your relationship? What is important to you about your job? And for a moment, you may sit there and think, well, being liked or being paid money or whatever that is, that's a value. But we go deeper than that. We go much, much deeper than that. Because when we haven't got congruence in our life, when we're feeling out of sorts, we may have come out of a relationship, we may have had a loss, we may be looking for a new goal. When we iron out what is really, really important to us, it forms goalposts, and we can actually kick the goal towards the goalpost. Now, values can change. Values can change in order of importance. They can be contextual. So what you value in a relationship is, if we're talking about a relationship, you would be thinking about somebody else in that relationship and what you hold dear about them. Values lead to beliefs, and beliefs lead to actions. So if ever you thought about having an argument with somebody, it will invariably be because your values have collided. They have said something or done something that have bashed against something you deeply believe in. And you probably don't even think about that at the time. But that's what's happening. So what I do is, the first thing I will ever do when I'm working with somebody is to look at with them what is important to them, and then get these values in a hierarchy. And just to explain a bit about that, there will be values that we really can't live without. And there will be others that are important to us, but not life-changing important. Now, I'll give you an example about this. I was working with somebody recently, and one of the values that he actually told me was very, very important to him was actually being loved, being cared for. Now, that came out in one word of love. When I actually asked him to dig deeper as to what that word meant, his actual interpretation of love, what it meant to him, was being loved. Now, that's a whole lot different, being loved, to loving. So holding on to that value that is very, very important to him, being in a relationship where perhaps he doesn't feel that he's being loved, would cause a lack of congruence, would cause a lack of comfort, happiness, peace. So the first thing we do is, if I say to you, what do you find most important about your relationship, a relationship? And you may say family. And I would say to you, okay, so what does that mean to you? What does family mean to you? And then what we do is we actually unpack that one word. And out of that one word can come a myriad of other words, because family is just what it means to you. Family to me, or family to my next door neighbour, isn't necessarily going to mean what family means to you. So in this particular instance, with the client that I was talking about, family to him meant security. So we've already got love means being loved. Family means security. So we go on and we go on and we get about 30 values. And people say, well, I can't possibly have 30 values. And I'd say, well, you have. We all have. And we just write them down in any order you say. We have a real brain dump on what's important to us. And then, invariably, about halfway through the telling me what your values are, you might say, well, I just don't know. I can't think of any more. And you'll sit there for a moment, and then, as if by magic, a further 2 or 3 or 4 might come out. Now, that is a very, very key point in talking about values and what's important to you, because that is when the brain has switched from being conscious to unconscious. And this is where the deepest values will be stored, in your subconscious. If I gave you a piece of paper and said, write down your values, you would probably write down honesty, integrity, truth, I don't know, something like that. I did when I did mine. That's what I wrote down. But when we go into the unconscious, the subconscious, if you will, and we really, really unpack those and dig deep, it's usually the last ones out of the box that are the most important to you. Now, when you're finding yourself lost and you don't know how to move on, having a piece of paper with a few words written on it could seem a little bit irrelevant. Okay, what do I do with this? I know what they are now. But what we then do is we talk around those top values. We talk around the experience that you would have had when you're thinking about them. Because to say family, you will be casting your mind back to a situation where your family was involved, how you were feeling at the time, who was there, what were you thinking, was anything being said to you? So you will have a whole scenario that you could bring to hand around each value. And you will get a feeling of warmth, you will get a feeling of just being right and just everything being okay. So this piece of paper with these values written down starts to become a bit more important, a bit more relevant. So I would say to you, okay, so you've chosen family, and that means security. You've chosen time out. That means choice. You've chosen equality. That means self-respect to you. You've chosen kindness. Now, with all of these values now, you've got them, you're holding on to them. And what we do is we go back and we look at the situations that you've been in when you've experienced these to get the maximum joy and pleasure out of each word. And then what we do, we look at, and this is really, really good fun doing this, is we pick the top 3. And once we've picked your top 3 values, we will then look at, on an average day, as you are now, how much are those values being satisfied? How much are they being respected? How much are you really, really paying homage to them? How much are other people around you paying respect to them? And that becomes massively important. And I was working with a client recently who her top value was acknowledgement. Now, it started out as freedom. And when we actually pinned it down, freedom meant being acknowledged, acknowledgement. And as it stands, when she came to see me, that was being satisfied about 30% of the time. Now, when you think that your very, very top value, the thing that is most important in your decision making, is to be acknowledged, and that is not being satisfied or respected any more than 30% of the time, you kind of see how there starts to become an incongruence, feeling unsettled emotionally, feeling lost with the way forward. But then we use it to really, really good use, because then we use it to, okay, who around you is giving you that? Who around you is helping you to achieve that? If you didn't know what it was, how do they? So we then we do what we call an ecology check. what is other person's interest in this? Does one of my values marry up with somebody that I'm actually with? Is it way off beam? What am I going to do about it? What do I want to do about it? Now, I said recently when on a podcast, I talked about moving jobs, and I said, and I big stick with this, that if you want to spend more time with family, if family is your number one value, if you've just left a job that you were doing 70 hours a week and moved straight into another job doing 70 hours a week, you may pay the bills, but actually it's not going to satisfy your value of being with your family terribly much. So the question there for you would be, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to ignore your number one value and head for that 70-hour-a-week job? Or are you going to do something different? Now that sounds quite brave, I guess, and it sounds quite cranky to put that to somebody who's considering coming out of a 70-hour-a-week job with a lot of money into another 70-hour-a-week job, or to give up and spend more time with their family. So once you've recognized your value, what's really, really important to you, there will be a need for being courageous at times. I came out of a big crunchy career, and I knew that I wanted to satisfy my number one value, which is honesty. And by that, I mean being true to myself. Now, being true to myself wasn't doing what I was doing. Being true to myself was doing what I'm doing now. But in order to do that, we then need to look at what are we prepared to trade off in order to meet that value and fall in love with that value and respect it and hold it. What are we prepared to do for that? Now, in my case, I sold my house because the finances were not ever going to marry up at that point with meeting this number one value, which is being true to myself. Now, that's a big move. It's a brave move. But in following that number one value, what I have today is, yes, a smaller house, but I have complete and utter congruence in everything I do. Everything I do now, my work, what I believe in, has complete congruence. And that has all come about with actually finding out what my number 1, 2, and 3 values are and moving towards them. Now, there is, with an NLP reference to this, which is what I practice, we can change the order of values. If you are living with somebody where you don't share the same top values, I think it's a little bit dicey to try and change your number one value. But what we can do is we can change the order of the lower values. And if that sounds a little bit complicated, all we do is take the situation that you think about that made you so happy when you think about that value. So we could say, with regards to education, education might be very important to you. It might not be so important to your partner. Now, we can take education and you could say, but it's very important to me. And we can do some work around that. We can unpack that and say, well, which bit of being educated is important to you? And what we can do is we can give it a different order. We can attach different feelings to it. We can swap the order around so that it becomes not unimportant, but less important for the time being. So we're not ignoring the value. We're saying, okay, this is what I find very, very important, but it isn't as important as being financially secure at the moment with my partner and buying a new flat. So it isn't as black and white as we don't share our values, so I'm not going to stay with that person. Far from it. But we can change the order of values. The other thing that is hugely important, and this is in the days of internet dating, I guess, and this is kind of like Tinder with values. Not that I've ever used Tinder, but this is Tinder with values. And where we swipe right and swipe left, so I do know a bit about it. Where we swipe right and swipe left is what is important to you. I don't know whether anybody has ever used that when they've actually chosen a potential new partner. What is important to you? Now, I haven't used Tinder, but I did use another one. And I did choose my husband now from an internet dating site. And the reason I'm going to share this with you is because in finding out what was important to this guy, way before how tall he was, I didn't know how tall he was because he was working away, how much he weighed, how much he owned, what his eye colour was, whether he had hair or not hair, all of this, what is important to him. Now, rather than make it sound as if I did a bit of a sort of quiz, a test, all I did in conversation was to pick up things that were being fed back to me. And I'll give you an example. One of my top 3 values is my family. And family to me is all important. I would never ever jeopardize my family for any other decision. Now, my husband was away at sea when I met him and we were writing, and I asked him when we were going to meet up. His response was, "I'm back on Friday. I hope you don't mind. I won't be able to see you till Monday because I have my sons over the weekend. They are the most important thing to me." Now, you may appreciate that as my values are my top 3 values are being true to myself and my family and giving more for less, they're my top 3 values. Giving more out to receive less back. Bingo. So without even seeing this guy, I've now really found a common value. Now, 7 years later, we're married. We don't share the same values and everything, but we do share most of the top 3. And this particular guy is there for me to be who I want to be. So value number 1, family, value number 2, helping me to give out more and expect less back, value number 3, all being met, all being respected, and all being paid homage to. So what I would say to anybody who is in the Tinder stage of life, do some values first. Do that before you even work out what the physical attributes are. In thinking about a new career, are you going to be acknowledged if acknowledgement is your number 1 value? Are you going to be? If you like working alone and you prefer your own company and you value introversion, if you value that, are you going to be happy plunged into a world where you're surrounded by a load of other noise? So very, very simply, in the simplest terms possible, we find out what's really, really important to us. We understand it, what it means to us. We enjoy the feelings it brings to us. And then we set that as our goalpost. Then what we do in any other decision in life is we just refer back to these and trust them.